Hey, this is Dave, and this is for the Shape, the final chapter of the class for disciple makers. And today we're going to talk about experiences. Thank you for your patience, and we look forward to getting this out to y'all, and so that you can watch this and take that last step for our Shape. It's been a great class. Been so glad to be a part of it, and I pray that God helps you not only in the areas of marriage and just working with others and just learning people the way that God has wired different people, and that every person that God has wired, he's done that importance, but it's learning to utilize the things that God has given us for his glory, whether that be in our family, whether that be at work, whether that be in ministry of some sort. Remember, all of us are called to ministry. Well, today we're going to talk about experiences. That's the E. So we had S is spiritual gifts, H is heart, A is abilities, P is personality, and E is experiences. God desires to take all things and bring it all together for his glory. God uses both positive and negative experiences to form us, to form our ministry, to form how we serve God in this world. Every one of us has both positive and negative. And the more that we allow God to work in us and through us to deal with the things that happen because of us and to us in this life, makes all the difference. You see, first of all, God has given me positive experiences. And the one that I wrote down here for today in the notes that I'll have for you is a trip to Israel. You see, a lot of you hear me talk about Israel, and you're like, oh, there goes Dave on Israel again. And I know I talk about it a lot, but here's some of the background of why that is. For when I was early on in ministry, I was in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I was listening to the president of a ministry called Back to the Bible, who would go to Israel every year. And I had zero interest to go to Israel up to this point. I remember even in college, we had the option to go and study in Israel for a month. Didn't even care. Just had got married, didn't matter. And well, just a few years later, all that changed. And I sat there and I listened to this guy tell the story of the Good Samaritan. And he told it and just described, having been in Israel, having been in that spot, what the terrain was, and totally changed that story and my understanding of that story, I should say. And ever since then, I had a desire to go to Israel. Over the years, I had a couple opportunities that maybe came up and I just didn't work out. So for over 20 years, I had prayed and asked the Lord that I would be able to go to Israel before my life here on earth is up. God being faithful, God being, it took 20 years, but boy, better late than never. This was a trip that has changed the trajectory of my life, not to say even the way I teach, how I teach, all those different things. And the rich experiences that I had was just incredible. That impacts the way that I serve God every single day. On the other hand, I've also had negative experiences. I remember when I was in junior high, I think it was in 7th grade, I remember overhearing a lot of commotion. I'd already gone to bed. This was a Saturday night. I heard a lot of commotion up in our house, and I didn't know what was going on. I didn't go out. I just stayed in bed, but I knew something was going on, and I could tell that it involved my brother, and I didn't know all that was going on, but it was late at night. Well, it turns out, I find out the next morning, my parents sat me down and they told me that my brother had attempted suicide. And he back in that day, you had in your truck, you had gun racks. And so he had his gun in a gun rack, and he just had put his head back and was going to blow his head off. And in fact, he didn't thank the Lord. It didn't end up blowing his head off, but he moved just in time, and the whole side of his truck was blown out. And I remember seeing that the next day. And, still to years later, he told us that when he was sitting there, he felt literally somebody slap him in the back of the head at just the right moment to save him. Otherwise, he would have been killed. that was a time that changed. I remember going to school that next Monday, and I remember, being in a small town, everybody knows your business, and I remember seeing kids whispering, and they were looking at me, and whether they were actually whispering about my brother or not, it had gotten around. And I remember how much that has hugely affected me. How I never wanted to see somebody go down that road, go down that path. All of us have times where it's extremely difficult, but my heart and my desire has been since then to never see somebody go down the road of suicide. It's affected so much of my life and so much of my ministry because I went through it. There's so many things that you have gone through that God is allowed to go through. He allowed you to go through. It wasn't necessarily His will. It wasn't His desire. But we live in a broken world, and broken things happen. But the amazing thing when we bring God into the equation, even when we go through horrifying situations, God can take that. He can heal our hearts, and He can actually help us to make a ministry out of that. So I've grown up. I have a deep desire to help hurting people. Some of that has to do with that experience. There's a few quotes that I want to throw your way. This one's from Helen Keller. As you know, Helen Keller was not only deaf, she was mute, and she was blind. How she did anything is just a miracle of God. But Helen Keller said this: the marvelous richness of human experience would lose something of rewarding joy if there were no limitations to overcome. The hilltop hour would not be so wonderful if there were no dark valleys to traverse. There's so many rich experiences that we have as we've come out of deep despair, as we've gone through difficulty, and then we begin to climb back up out of that valley and back onto the mountaintop, and it's an incredible experience. Here's another one from Soren Kierkegaard. It says this: life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. It's kind of the concept that, hindsight is 20/20. We can see things so much clearer after having gone through it, but yet we can't stay looking at the past and living in the past. We need to learn from the past. We need to let God speak to us and grow us so that we can move forward in the future. And a famous one, Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called to His purpose. It does not say that God works for good, that He only allows good to happen. Very much the opposite. But what God says is, I will bring even good out of those difficult situations for those that love Him and who are called according to His purpose. I want you to think for a moment about a hallway. I want you to think about just a hallway, and on each side are portraits. And you're just walking as you go, and whether it be in your own house or in the house of somebody else, you kind of walk and you see in those hallways all these pictures. Maybe it's family pictures or whatever. You see these things, and so I want us to look at it. When we look at our lives, we have our positive experiences. And then we have, on the other side of this, we have those negative, or what we should call maybe painful experiences. So we have positive experiences and negative experiences. Every one of us in our lives have both sides of this in our lives. One side of the hallway has to do with things that when we brings up those memories, it just kind of puts a smile on our face. On the other side of things, it's a little different. As we walk down this hallway, we kind of get to see, and so that's what we want to begin to do in this session, is to begin to look at the hallways of our lives and allow God some room to show us what the good experiences and what the painful experiences that have helped to shape our direction of our lives. It doesn't affect your deepest identity, as we talked about it before. Your identity that God gives you is completely separate, but our experiences, both good and bad, do have an impact on us. You see, this hallway represents your story. Your story equals time. Time equals your story. And so all of this, your story is important. God doesn't just let us go through things and it's all a waste. God redeems even the hard stuff to make a testimony that impacts people around us. So first of all, I want us to take a look as we walk down this hallway of some positive portraits in our story. So what I want you to encourage you to do is to take some time, number one, to pray and ask the Lord to bring to your mind some positive life portraits or parts of your story. And then begin to brainstorm. And I want you to just begin to write down as you kind of think of it. In fact, you can even draw something like this, a hallway, a line down the middle with positive experiences, painful experiences on the other side, and just begin to write down as many as you can think of. Whatever comes to mind, think about these things and just write them down. And till you just kind of feel like you've come to the end and you haven't. So here's some guidelines to help you with that process, help to kind of get the mind going a little bit. So first of all, things that are positive experiences personally. What are some positive personal achievements you have had or seen in your life? Reflect on the happy moments that have happened to you and just kind of let those things that have personally happened to you you've been a part of. The second area is vocationally. So let me just even write this down. Y'all will have the notes, you'll have access to notes, but I'll just even write this down now. But so personal. So what are your personal aspects? The other thing is vocational. In your vocation, what are some accomplishments you've seen in your work life? What have you enjoyed in your work life over the years? What makes it easy for you to get up? What do you love about those the things you've experienced throughout your work life? The next area is relational. And so some questions for you in that. What are some positive relationships you have enjoyed over the years with friends, spouse, family, whatever that may be? What relationships have helped you succeed in life, bring comfort to you, or have been a source of happiness for you? The next area is educationally. And so with that, what part of your time in school or trainings stand out to you as being positive? What memories put a smile on your face when it comes to your educational experiences? What accomplishments have you had in your collegiate, high school, grade school, whatever career? What stands out for you? The next one and the last one is spiritual. What has been a life-giving moment or moments in your life, in your walk with Jesus? Where have you seen God bless you and give you favor over the years? When did God feel very close to you? And how have you seen God come through for you? And the last question is, how have you grown in your walk with the Lord the most? Where have you seen God just particularly in these areas, he just worked and it was just a good thing for you? Well, now I want to switch into these same categories, but I want to switch, and this is a little harder. It's always great to look after the positive experiences, and this is why we're doing this one last and not the painful ones first, is because this one's harder. The temptation is to not want to go there on some things. In fact, what I would say is if you have some things that you're just like, oh, I'm afraid of thinking about that because that'll cause, a reaction, a difficulty, or whatever it may be, I encourage you to seek help, because maybe some things that are past experiences that are painful, you haven't worked through yet. you haven't gone through. And so, boy, I'd be honored if you came to Steph and I, or if you went to your pastor that at your church or whatever, or a counselor or whatever. I would encourage you to take the time to begin to let God process through this with you. So if you go hit a part and it's painful, kind of hit the periphery, but you don't, at this point, you don't need to go deeper. But I want you to go through this, and I want you to, personally, I want you to not just write down just it's easy to kind of go through the motions with this, but I ask you, the question, what has tested your endurance, your perseverance the most? What are those areas that have kind of hit you between the eyes? What I call, you're in a heavyweight boxing match and you get hit right between the eyes and you begin to wobble. Those things that just kind of knock you down in life. Divorce, abuse, death, alcoholism, cancer, depression, anxiety, job loss, bankruptcy, eating disorders. Don't skip over those, because those are experiences that God wants to heal you. And then he wants to take those and use those in your life to impact other people. And it's possible. Just like suicide, that was an incredible, difficult moment. We've had other incredibly difficult moments in our lives that God has allowed to heal us as we walk through those things. But then God took something and that was so hard for us, and he puts people in our path to be able to minister. And we don't minister it's not we're preaching at them, we're relating to them. There's a big difference. So personally, what are some painful experiences that stretched you to the limit? Vocationally, what are some moments of failure, loss, and stress you've experienced? Relationally, who's hurt you? What happened? Why was this hard for you? What impact did that have on your life? Educationally, what are moments of failure, letdown, and times when things didn't go your way? Spiritually, when were times God felt far away? What are moments you remember where your faith was tested and you may have even considered walking away from God? Those are the kinds of things that you need to write down in your experiences. Then I want you to take those, and after you've kind of just wrote down all kinds of different answers, and you've brainstormed, you've prayed first of all, but then you've brainstormed. And so I want you to take your time, and I want you to begin to write these and kind of begin to put these together. And so you'll have a worksheet that looks like this. You may have it with you right now. And I want you to take, after each one of those categories, I want you to take the 3 that stand out the most, or 4 or whatever. You can have more, but I have 3 slots for each one. And so for personal experiences, I want you to take number 1, number 2, and number 3. I want you to write down the ones that stick out for you the most. And there's a category for each one of those, for both those positive portraits of our lives, those positive pieces of our story, and then also for those painful parts of our story. Because God wants, because as you look at this, you're going to begin to see how God wants to take those, and you're probably already going to kind of relate to this in that, yeah, God has taken those things from my life, those significant moments of my life, and he's using them to accomplish things in me and through me. And so, again, God does not just waste anything. God, not even bad experiences. He takes those and he uses those to change the world. God has used so many of the positive and the negative things that have been a part of my journey to have great impact in people's lives. And I see that in Stephanie. I remember talking to Stephanie years ago, and we were going through a particularly difficult thing. And Steph was just kind of talking about, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to walk through this? And I said, you know what? What I know is this, is that God is going to take this difficult circumstance and that he's going to heal your heart. the wounds that you've taken on from this. And then God is gonna heal you to the point and strengthen you to the point that there will be people that will come to you with things like this or in the thereabouts, and they're at the point still where this event or this situation that happened was so hard and was so overwhelming and so critical for their lives. But for you, because what God has done in you through this, it'll be nothing. It won't be a major event for you. You'll understand, you'll be able to empathize in a way that you couldn't before. But what God has done is he's taken this situation that is overwhelming. He's healed you, he's counseled you, he's strengthened you, he's brought you to the point that when other people with the same issues come to you, it's not the big thing that it once was. And that's what I love about God. God wants to take the positive portraits of your story. He wants to take the painful portraits of your story. And he wants to utilize those along with your spiritual gifts, with your heart or your passion. You'll find your experiences often affect the things that you're passionate about. Your abilities, your personality, he'll bring it all together and work it. And in the next video, we're going to talk about beginning to take your shape and putting it all together. We'll see you then.